You have to love how our government uses major events to go ahead and release the unthinkable, quietly declassify documents. And today's story is no exception to that. This document, however, relating to 9/11. I'm going to show you the text. I'm going to show you what they released. And more importantly, Bush said what? Just after the events had transpired. That's the story we're going to cover here today. Now, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, what are you waiting for? Button just below. Help me, of course, share the story. Your comments are always appreciated. You have two means of supporting me. One is the membership platform I put up here. And by the way, the video we did on the Oath Keepers trial, my largest video to date. So I want to thank everyone who helped spread that story. If you didn't see it, I'll put a link above. This story did numbers that I have never experienced before, because we cover what's actually happening in the stories that not many other people will touch. And of course, that's why we created Restricted Republic. If you haven't been to the platform yet, what are you waiting for? That's restrictedrepublic.com. Right now, discount code FREEDOM. It's going to get you $5 a month for 2 years, plus 14 days for free. See everything Lisa Haven and I have been working on over there, and then another new adventure we're on. We're forked up. If you want to see an entirely different side of Lisa and I, get over there to explore food, drink, and entertainment like nothing you've ever seen before. Our first review is up, and it has been met with rave reviews. So again, you want to see something a little bit more lighthearted. Sometimes it's good to take a break from the news and watch how we do it, because everyone needs an escape from this reality we face every day. But now, let's get back to this broadcast. The Wall Street Journal was the first to pick up on this information, titling the article, U.S. Releases 9/11 Commission Interview with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. But that's not where it stopped, because The Intercept dived in much deeper. U.S. government quietly declassifies post-9/11 interview with Bush and Cheney, and we're going to show you that document. But first, let's give you a little background. On Wednesday, as the eyes of the U.S. public were focused on Tuesday's midterm election results, a U.S. government panel quietly released a new declassified summary of an Oval Office joint interview conducted with President George W. Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney about the September 11th attacks. The interview, carried out by members of the 9/11 Commission, was not recorded, of course, and the summary document constitutes the only known official record of the meeting. The meeting took place on April 29th, 2004. I'll put a link below in my description box so you can read the document in its entirety. And here's what the document looks like. Again, that link will be below, memorandum for the record, but let's dive into it. The commissioners, the meeting was preceded by a brief 5 to 10 minute meeting of the chair and vice chair with the president, vice president, and chief of staff card. The president and vice president were seated in chairs in front of the fireplace. The president's demeanor throughout was relaxed. He answered questions without notes. That's something that doesn't happen anymore, now does it? Commissioners and Gonzalez were on sofas and chairs. They go through the commissioner panels and who was against the wall. The portrait of Washington was over the fireplace, which was flanked by a bust of Lincoln and Churchill. Paintings of southwestern landscapes are on the wall. It was a beautiful spring day. But don't worry, the tenor of this meeting changes quickly. And there is certain elements of it that we're going to highlight in particular. The National Archives, NARA, and Declassification, the Interagency Security Classification Appeals Panel is the one who released this document. The interview took place just as a massive insurgency was erupting in Iraq. And they start this by saying one of the most striking aspects of the declassified document is the apparent absence of even a glimmer of self-awareness by Bush about the significance of the death and destruction he was unleashing with his global war. And again, going back to the highlighted section, the interview took place just as a massive insurgency was erupting in Iraq against a U.S. occupation that would kill thousands of U.S. soldiers and tens of thousands of Iraqi citizens. While the document is a rough transcript and summary, Bush comes off as almost childishly simplistic in his insights and analysis. But one of the striking findings you'll see in this document as we review it, and as the author from The Intercept wrote, the lack of any sensitive information contained within the document should spur questions as to why it took more than 18 years to be made public. But I'm going to depart slightly from the author, because it is the lack of details, the very specific disorganization that was going on is why this was held for so long, because it shines through the document. It goes to highlight that anyone that believes the government is still an organized, finely tuned machine, well, that will quickly be dismissed. A photo that none of us will ever forget. President Bush being informed of what just occurred. Chairman Keene asked why the president stayed in the education event when he got word of the second plane hitting the World Trade Center. The president said he saw the first crash. Halfway into the event, Andy Card walked in and whispered to him about the second plane, the photo I just showed you, and that America was under attack. He was collecting his thoughts. He stayed in the event. He thought for about 4 or 5 minutes. His instinct was to be calm, not to have the country see a rattled president in a high moment. The country was under attack. He was trying to understand what that means. Some of us process information quicker than others, albeit. He was looking at the press corps and saw them on their telephones. He felt he should project calm and strength until he could understand better what was happening. Now, would that have been your reaction? Would you have jumped out of your seat, rushed out of the classroom, and immediately create a spectacle? I ask you, a lot of people analyze that very movement or lack of movement itself. Keene asked what the immediate decisions the president thought he needed to make. The president said he was pressured to get on the plane, made some quick remarks, and blasted out of there. Asked again about decisions, the president mentioned his calls to the vice president. He also called Condoleezza Rice. He wanted to check on his wife. There was all kinds of rumors. One was the Capitol was under attack. His wife Laura was supposedly at Capitol Hill that morning. He was concerned about his family, rightfully so. He remembered the vice president saying, "Don't come home." Rice said that too. It was his duty to protect the continuity of the presidency. If something happened to the president in an emergency, there would have been more chaos. The Secret Service was aware of this too, but Cheney sees complete control. It's one of the little bits of information that comes out in this document. Cheney was the overriding force, beckoning orders to the president, of course, which he was following. He talked to the vice president. He was arriving at Air Force One, or on Air Force One, about rules of engagement. The vice president advised him not to come back. He asked him to authorize this. He, the VP, was at the PEOC then, getting in an operational position. The vice president is rushing to the PEOC. After the vice president gets there, the president and vice president talk about rules of engagement. The authority is then granted, if necessary, to shoot down civilian airliners. It's one of the major decisions made in it, and the president later backs it up and says that Cheney didn't make that decision autonomously, that he agreed with it. At Air Force One, the communications were not as good as they should have been, and here it starts to come out. In a moment of significant attack on this country, our very basic fundamental communication lines don't work. There were all these rumors. He hadn't heard of the fog of war. That day he saw it firsthand. He wanted to go back to D.C. They were going to Barksdale Air Force Base. An Air Force colonel came to him and said Air Force One was a target. He asked the colonel, "How do you know?" "A call to the Situation Room," he answered. There was a report about a possible attack on Crawford. They had an open line to the PEOC, but it kept cutting off. Later, the vice president told him about the incoming aircraft. Our fighters were engaged. They were enacting the president's orders, locked on. He told, perhaps indicating Ari Fleischer, his order was now in effect. That order, if necessary, to shoot down civilian airliners. But now some more details emerge. It appears Rumsfeld was missing in action. The president said he tried to field on the phone and they couldn't find him. He did talk to him briefly earlier, then later they couldn't find him for a period. It was frustrating. With notes of exasperation, they found the PEOC was his main contact. He was very frustrated about not being able to make contact with different people. He expressed his frustration to Andy Card on Air Force One, the president of the United States, in times of this nation's highest tragedy, could not reach his key advisors. You could begin now to start to understand why some of this information was not released up front. The president said Condi is too polite. Oh, another shot at Condoleezza Rice. It wasn't just about swatting flies. He had to know, where's the action? "I'm an impatient person," he said. "I get frustrated by the slow movement of government. Our papers referred to an elimination strategy. How are we going to eliminate Al-Qaeda?" The problems were more than just this or that guy. There would be a report of a threat in Jordan and action would be taken on that. Good. That was one problem. But what about the rest as Bush begins to lose patience, according to this document? There would be a threat somewhere else. That was another problem. That is what he meant by swatting flies, and that was fine. But the longer range approach, where was it? And why was Condoleezza Rice and the administration and his advisors not providing it? Commissioner Gordon asked if the president or vice president had been involved in permitting planes carrying Saudi nationals to leave after 9/11. No, the president said. He had no idea about this until he read about it in the papers. And we saw a repeat of this event come the COVID pandemic, when people were allowed to be flying in and out when maybe there was a time they shouldn't have been. Our government is very consistent in its mistakes, and this goes to illustrate that. The vice president also gave a negative answer. But then this document comes up. The one that spurred so much controversy, dated April 10th of 2004, bin Laden determined to strike in the U.S. the details of his plans to attack the very continental United States of America. The question about this document is, why was action not taken? If the FBI and so many of the letter agencies and the administration was aware of what was going on, well, doesn't that resonate to something that just occurred recently? It is the consistency of our government's response that is never in question. Their consistency of inaction in times of necessary action, and action in times when there doesn't need to be any necessary action. Several 9/11 commissioners raised the issue of the infamous presidential daily briefing, that document I just showed you. The document cited foreign intelligence indicating Osama bin Laden wanted to hijack U.S. aircraft. That indicates patterns of suspicious activity in this country consistent with preparations for hijacking or other types of attacks, including recent surveillance of federal buildings in New York. Actionable intelligence. And said it was just a general assessment. That was Bush making that declaration. So is Al-Qaeda. Bush claimed that none of the briefings he received was commenting on any threat in America. There was no actionable intelligence on such a threat. Not one. The threat was overseas. That was what George said. Bush said he thought if he knew there was been a serious concern in August of 2001, he would have known about it. Commissioner Thompson commented on a tendency of Americans to rely on hindsight and prepare to fight the last war. Who was responsible to ensure that didn't happen? Me, the president quickly replied. I'm in charge of that. You have to get good people, develop a good strategy, and hope it works. The president didn't see much point in assigning personal blame for 9/11. If the previous administration could have done something to stop it, he was sure that they would have done everything in their power. Nobody wants something like that to happen. They would have moved heaven and earth to stop it. Many again, going back to this document, asking, was heaven and earth moved to stop it? And why does Bush give as a reason to not take action? They were being criticized for not launching a preemptive attack against Afghanistan, and they were criticized for preemptively attacking Iraq. Blair allegedly told Bush that if the president had said before 9/11 he wanted to put forces in Afghanistan, he, Blair, would have been floored. I would have looked at you like a nut. A president can't force preemptive war without a cause. The country didn't like war. I don't like it either, the president said. But boy, how times have changed. So, does it appear that Bush couldn't make a decision on his own? He had to rely on his advisors and others? It's okay to consult, but at times of tragedy, it's time to act, and it's time to act swiftly. But you see, they didn't delay on everything. No, rather, this allowed for something much larger. The president said the strategy being developed before 9/11, he would have tried to use our power and our charm on preemption without 9/11 because of Cole. The USS Cole is what they're referring to. The president agreed. That is my point, but I was willing to pursue it, he said. It would not have been easy. He referred again to Prime Minister Blair's argument in their conversation earlier that day, but he said it was easier to make the case after 9/11. People could fully understand how things were different, and they most certainly were. And then you stumble into this little nugget. The president said he was curious about that statement. The president said he was unaware that Clinton had made a threat, such a threat, to the Taliban. The term preliminary judgment had been argued to him. The report he saw said that they might be connected, the Cole and this attack. Commissioner Benveniste referred to the evidence implicating Bloody. He acknowledged that the CIA and FBI had not reported a conclusion, but the evidence was clear. He said that Attorney General Ashcroft had testified to concerns over the command and control structure of al-Qaeda, and that was mystifying to him. Why was it so important to link bin Laden directly to the al-Qaeda attack on the Cole? The problem, therefore, was whether to make good on the threat by retaliating against the Taliban. The president said he never said, "Cough him up or I'll blast you." If he said that, well, in that case, you have to be ready to blast. Commissioner Benveniste said there was intelligence that clearly established al-Qaeda's responsibility, so then the threat to retaliate against the Taliban should have been triggered by the attack on the Cole. But it wasn't. And that, in essence, is my belief as to why this document wasn't released. The Commission, although not all the correspondence is within this document, almost appears to be stating that we did have the intelligence, we did have the knowledge, and everyone stood down. While President Bush determines if he should sound like a bully, but rather sat back and waited for his advisors to report back to him rather than dictating any clear strategy. And that is one of the largest failures of what occurred. So I invite you to read this document. It's very important to American history. It shows you how a fragmented government with broken communication and no semblance of an organized response, not acting on prior intel that later did not go to prevent the horrific attacks of 9/11. And now we see it in a transcript with several people seated in front of a fireplace, calmly asking questions as our nation had just been involved in one of the most devastating attacks in American history. Didn't want to go without bringing you this report and this information. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.